Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome to the side event. We may start with a short introduction of our chairman, Thaler.
Okay. So welcome everybody to this webinar on national walking strategies. I would like to express my gratitude that so many participants have joined us. Just few words at the beginning on the background of this initiative. You know that, of course, I'm sure you're all convinced that walking is the most sustainable form of mobility. But you always may have recognized that walking is obviously often seen as a just local issue, which has to be dealt with by communities, municipalities, and the local level. On the other hand, you'll see that if we want to achieve the real transformation to a sustainable, environment-friendly, climate-friendly mobility system, and also to achieve our climate targets, and additionally to achieve a recovery of our after the pandemics, you will certainly imagine that walking is not just a local form of mobility, but it's a pillar of our mobility system. Especially during the COVID times and the restrictions, you have seen that the to walk around in an environment surrounding your home is absolutely important for your daily deliveries, but also for your social life, at least for recreation, for example. But we need space. All of us have suffered less space, so sometimes we had to share the lanes because we are required to have distance to each other. So this is a crucial question, which is as a consequence of the pandemics. The space, we have too less space for walking, and this is not just an issue appearing in one city or in two municipalities. No, it's appearing everywhere. So it's also a big issue, not just for local communities, but also for a federal government. And of course, also for the European institutions. So to accept or to recognize walking as an equal mode of transport, an equal form of moving, and not just driving a car or using public transport or using a bike. This is a fundamental issue. Therefore, I think it's important that also on the national level, but also on the pan-European level, we recognize walking as a pillar of our mobility system. And for that, we need also comprehensive policies and strategies, not just single local events and single local initiatives. We have a lot of ambitious cities around Europe. We need also the involvement and the guidance of the national level, because the national level is responsible for the traffic code, for legal requirements, but also for financing infrastructure, for supporting the cities. So therefore, we decided to take this on occasion of the high-level meeting of the Transport, Health, Environment Pan-European Program. We take the opportunity to invite you to this webinar. I'm very grateful to all who are participating. We just want to have an exchange of view on the national strategies on walking, but also on local initiatives on the first master plans on walking on city level. So I give the floor back to Alessandra. She will guide you through the whole webinar, and I look forward very fruitful and constructive and forward-looking contributions. Thanks a lot for participating. Unfortunately, normally we would have organized this workshop on walking, of course, in a walking setup, because this is the way how philosophers have creative ideas. But now we are forced to sit in a room on a fantastic spring day in Vienna and talk about walking. But despite all that, stay inspired, and we hope that this webinar will contribute to that. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Ola Thaler. Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to the side event, and thank you all for coming here and joining us today. We will highlight within this webinar initiatives and outstanding strategies on the national level on walking, and we will have an insight in a couple of that and good practice examples within Europe. And I will now share my presentation and
okay, I'm going to keep going then. Thank you. My name is Jim Walker. I'm one of the directors here at the Walk 21 Foundation. And those of you who don't know, we've been working for more than 20 years to support towns, cities, and countries to develop safer, more inclusive and welcoming places for people to walk. I just wanted to share with you a little introduction about what this might mean for the PEP. And we've been working obviously internationally, but I particularly wanted to share with you how we have created the International Charter, particularly since 2015, to set a policy agenda so that people could understand that there are principles about walking that matter, where we need to connect people together and work across disciplines. And we've got more than 34 illustrative actions in this charter, which has been signed by more than 5,000 people. And in fact, we've just worked out by people in more than 100 countries. It's proving useful to recognize that this isn't just the responsibility of an engineer or a planner. It does need creating multidisciplinary teams to actually be effective. But policies are now happening all over the world. And I just wanted to share with you the fact that this is not just in Europe. We think that there are over 100 countries now with either national or subnational documents that support and encourage walking. Here's a sample of some. Cities such as Rotterdam, who did a very proactive strategy just last year. It's been very well received, tying up environmental issues with economic issues and thinking right the way across how their city looks and feels, engaging their communities. But more recently as well, in Ethiopia, and in fact in several countries across Africa, the Scotland, New Zealand, Wales, and of course we'll be hearing a little bit about the one in Austria. But in many, many places, I guess my point being here is that there seems to be a growing momentum for walking strategies working at every level. And I think these are starting to have an impact. And we've seen a common pathway that people tend to be using to make sure that these documents are effective. And the three things that I wanted to particularly share with you was the fact that where possible, actually keeping people on their feet is really important. Retaining walking, we often think about the need to get people out of their cars, but actually by the time people are in their cars, it's quite expensive to actually get people back out again and think about their feet. But actually every journey begins and ends with a step. And so 79% of people, when you actually look at the Eurostat data, and this is from 2014, but in every country in Europe, and I know it's varied, but in every country in Europe, people are choosing to walk to get to and from places. And even when they don't have the choice, there is still a huge number of people walking. And of course, we know the relationship between footfall, dwell time, and spend is absolutely critical to the way that our urban fabric really works. But one of the second most important themes that we find across national strategies is to ensure that we're also protecting people. Across Europe, and again, another Eurostat map here, but you'll see certainly an imbalance about the number of people who are not just dying, but also the thousands of people who are injured annually in road traffic crashes all the way across Europe. Now, we know that there are many successful ways to reduce that. That means we have to think about tackling driver behavior. We actually have to deal with speed. And we have to invest in infrastructure that gives priority to people on foot. That takes national leadership, not just local action. And combined with that safety it is needing to make sure that we're actually enabling people to walk. We know that, yes, 30% of car trips in Europe are less than 3 kilometers. That's only half an hour walk, a perfectly reasonable and practical way. But for many people, they choose, if they have the choice and they can afford to, they will choose not to if we literally don't think about rolling out the red carpet. I know this seems like an extreme, but they do this in some cities and in some places. And I think at a national level, this is an opportunity in Europe to really think about how we could run a red carpet right the way across the state, across all the different states. And actually thinking about that interrelationship with health is really quite critical. This map here is not showing health. It's not showing all the car trips. This is showing motorization. And if you think back towards that map I just showed about where we have safety concerns, actually there's a real correlation between where we have increases in motorization, often because there hasn't been the investment in the infrastructure to keep people on their feet. And so, look, pedestrians very often feel like they're invisible, and yet without them, our cities, our towns, our countries actually wouldn't be working as efficiently or as effectively as possible. We've done some of the maths. We did this in parallel to some work that was done for cycling. And we quickly come up with some really big numbers, 250 billion euros a year that we've estimated the benefits of walking in Europe. And you'll see some of the really big numbers are around tourism and health, but don't get the message wrong. That doesn't mean that that means it's only their responsibility or this is how it's going to work. It takes national leadership to bring together to make sure that all these benefits are realized with investment in infrastructure. And that means transport, environment departments really need to stitch together the right teams to make this happen. I've only with you for a few minutes, so I hope I can give you some sort of introduction to what this session is all about. Thinking about this need to retain, protect, and enable everyone to walk in Europe, but actually internationally everywhere. And we are certainly here to help. If we, as a small but meaningful NGO working internationally in lots of places, if we can help you, we'd be very happy to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim. Unfortunately, I skipped a little bit of your presentation and my presentation as well, but thank you very much that you started your slides. So I just have the insight of the last couple of slides. So what are the main priorities for walking? What do you say?
Well, I think, as I say, it's about creating teams of people that work across disciplines to actually think about how we focus on the people-centered approach about how we want our cities to be. You know, we know that where we've focused on walking for 20 plus years because it's actually one of the easiest, quickest ways of knowing whether a place is successful. The language has evolved over that time about sustainability, livability, friendliness, happiness. You know, we know that all those benefits are there, but it still requires leadership. And we have to decide that these are the places that we want. And I think Europe is right on the edge of this, you know, bearing in mind that we know 70% of countries now either have national or subnational policies that are supportive of walking policy. I think now is the time for Europe to really lead about that framework that makes sure that we're all being as effective as possible. Have we lost you again? No, you're back. You're scaring me, all this flying in and out.
Yeah, but absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I'm just trying to check out if there are any further questions in the chat, but I think until now, everything is clear. So I will start again. Oh, there is one question from Roberto De Bong, and he asked you, I understand that developing a national walking strategy is an intersectoral possibility with a good dose of bottom-up approach, but who usually superheads a national walking strategy? Would it be the authority responsible for transport or local councils?
Yeah, really good question. Thank you very much for asking it. I mean, engaging citizens is absolutely critical. I put that picture of the pedestrian looking almost invisible on that crossing purposefully at the end there, because actually, I know very often they aren't talking out as loud as they can. I mean, we've got Dieter in the call here and several other from different organizations. There is a growing movement here, but actually people put up with a lot. And when we give them the opportunity to say where they aren't happy, rather than waiting until they motorize, as I keep saying, it's much better to keep people on their feet. And that means starting with the community. And I think the places where we've seen this, the most effective policy, it's where they've embedded community engagement from the beginning with multidisciplinary teams who are going to be responding to problems. We have to know where the problems are and make sure that we're targeting them with the solutions. We don't want to just do making the nice areas nicer. This has to be about tackling places where people don't feel safe, putting in the infrastructure where there's nothing there at the moment, and making sure that everyone has not just the right to walk, but the right to enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think that we're really into this topic because there is definitely a need for a walking strategy, and I think we can go on with the agenda, and I will try to restart my presentation. Please, I will try.
Okay, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. So, I'm not sure if okay, now the presentation is shared, so thank you very much. I'm proud and I'm happy that I can present you the Austrian Masterplan walking today. So in 2015, Austria has elaborated for the very first time a national walking strategy. It's called the Masterplan Walking. And the aim of this strategic document is, on the one hand, well, to raise the awareness and to take better account of the needs of pedestrians in political decision-making at the federal, at the regional, and at the municipality level. And on the other hand, to optimize the necessary framework condition to promote walking as a very, very important transport mode in the transportation system. So the Masterplan Walking contains Austria contains 10 fields of action with 26 concrete measures, and a very important key factor, and I think Jim also mentioned it already before as well, the cooperation and coordination at the different levels, on the national and the federal, but also on the regional and on the municipality level. And a second really crucial factor is the creation of action programs and financial support programs to promote the walking infrastructure and the network of pedestrian routes. So the concept of the cities of short distances within in the urban areas, as well as establishing the link with other means of transport like cycling or public transport, is very, very important to make this transport mode more attractive. And we will also have to set a focus on research activities, on training programs, and the creation of a high-quality database on walking. Well, to underline or highlight the importance of this transport mode, because like nowadays in the surveys, normally the main mode of transport is shown, so walking is underestimated by 1.5 times. So there's a lot of work to do, and these are the fields of action tackled within this Masterplan Walking. And what happened these last 5 to 6 years in Austria? What are the main activities and initiatives that happened since 2015? So first to say is that many initiatives in Austria are focusing on walking, so especially regarding walking infrastructure. We have a lot of pedestrian and shared space zones, but also on the organizational or conceptual level, there is work done. So a Masterplan Walking Salzburg is elaborated. Schwifcz, I think the next speaker in the session, will present the insights of this Masterplan Walking on the municipality and city level. But on the national level, walking is integrated in the Austrian National Energy and Climate Plan, as well as in the coalition agreement of the Austrian government. So we have a really special focus on active mobility in the coalition program. And as part of the climate initiative Klimaaktiv Mobil, the federal ministry of Austria has launched this year a financial supportive program to promote walking infrastructure. So for the very first time, it's possible to receive a funding for walking infrastructure on the city and municipality level. And the applicants have to elaborate a local master plan walking. So this is a main requirement for receiving this funding. And within Klimaaktiv Mobil, there's also an advisory program for mobility management for cities, for municipalities, for companies, but also for tourism and for schools. And this is very new, there's a special focus on Klimaaktiv Mobil, on active mobility, on awareness rising. And since the Masterplan walking has been established, there is also a nationwide coordination working group on walking. So the main interests of various stakeholders are coordinated within this working group, and the members are representatives of the federal government, as well as the federal states, cities and municipalities, and various stakeholders and interest groups. And within this working group, different or various pedestrian-friendly changes to road traffic regulation has been elaborated. For example, the banning of scooters in the for the sidewalks, so that the pedestrians have a lot of more space for walking. And there's also a training program established this year, active mobility for municipal pedestrian commissioners. This was a short overview of what happened. So what are the next main steps, the next main activities? So first of all, we have to evaluate the Masterplan walking and specific measures in the Masterplan walking with the time horizon of 2030. And we also want to tackle the problem of raising the attractiveness of urban spaces for the pedestrians. So we want to improve the walking infrastructure within the financial supportive program Klimaaktiv Mobil, but also improve the legal framework for pedestrian. A special focus on the on creating or guaranteeing the road safety for pedestrians. And we also want to improve the database for the statistical service, so to have a reliable model split and to have the real data on walking. And the next steps for sure will be not only to establish a Masterplan walking on a national level, but also on the city and municipality level to create a framework and a good network of pedestrian routes. So thank you very much. And I'm really happy to answer any of your questions, if there are any. So I don't see any in the chat yet. So I think that we can go on with our agenda. For sure, I will answer any question if they will pop up in the chat. And go on. Øvstedal, can you share your audio and video? Because then we are moving on with the Norwegian walking strategy. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
There are 6 action areas, and it explains the action areas and action points on national and local level, and it explains how this can be followed up. The 6 action areas, it's about responsibility and cooperation, about the physical environment on urban, network and street level. It's about daily operations and maintenance, the traffic interplay, to promote an active walking culture, and it's about knowledge And as I yeah. Then we followed up this in 2014 with a guidance on how to make local walking strategies and pedestrian plans. It explains how you can work when you make a local walking strategy and how you invite the inhabitants to take part, how you map the situation in your own municipality. And it explains how you can use the Building Act and the Norwegian planning system to provide better conditions for pedestrians. And we see that different cities, they map their own situation, they invite their inhabitants to work on this, and so they end up with different focus areas. But we also stress that there should be both long-term and short-term measures, so that you then at the same year as we published the walking strategy, there was a political agreement to target 0 increase in urban private car traffic. And later on, this led to what we call urban growth agreements. And so in this way, we have connected the political targets on area planning with political targets when it comes to transport. So what the 0 increase in urban private car traffic says is that there was a real expectation of growing urban areas, the number of inhabitants and the traffic, but all the increase in person trips should be taken as walking, biking, and public transport. And through for 4 of the larger urban areas in Norway, there has been formal agreements between the municipal, regional, and state level, and this leads to agreements on investing in public transport infrastructure and for Bergen in intercity trains, and public and walking is a natural part also of public transport trips. So this has helped to turn around the mobility pyramid. In 2009, when the task was formulated, please develop a national strategy to provide for pedestrians, they already pointed out many of these good reasons that you all know. It's about individual health and life quality. It's about lively streets and neighborhoods, and it's about more attractive towns and cities to live in. And it makes it more attractive to travel by public transport. And the document also looked at the different perspectives on global and local level. And because there are so many good reasons why we should plan for, or should plan for and provide for pedestrians, we find that the walking strategy is a good framework to coordinate actions. It has helped us to give more coordinated measures at state level. The government presents its expectations to regional and municipal planning each or every 4 years, and many of the key messages from the walking strategy is presented there, as it is also in the different national action plans, like for physical activity, for traffic safety, for universal design. So people who work at municipal and regional level, they get the message from different documents and different disciplines. And we also work together when there is when we make these guidance documents, whether it's on age-friendly placemaking or about urban spaces or about wayfinding, user involvement, or mapping tools in spatial planning. There is a communication between the different ministries and agents so that we coordinate the messages that we present. And I find that both the Norwegian national walking strategy and the local strategies, they have brought more awareness about walking as a mode in itself. We see that plans are followed and are included in other thematic plans. And well, we see that it's important to have staff and have continuity in staff, and to include daily operations and maintenance when you upgrade the infrastructure. And we see that the National Transport Plan also is a portal for other actors' involvement. They challenge us, or yeah, when they have good ideas, they come and say that you have a national walking strategy, so you should help us or coordinate this or contribute or coordinate. So one example is that there is, as part of this being more active, there has been mapping of leisure routes and signposting leisure routes from the centers of many municipalities. So this was in short, very brief about the Norwegian walking strategy, and I will also be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think there popped up a question in the chat. I will read it out. Please explain more about school hard zones, and can you offer any advice for a capital city like Brussels to start using this concept?
Yes, the school hard zones is a collaboration between traffic safety organizations and the school and many other actors, and they make a zone around the school, and it should be absolutely safe to walk within that zone. So like parents should, if they take their kids by car, they should there are drop-off zones in the outskirts of this zone, so they should not drive all the way into the school area. And the same actually with public transport bringing children to school. So it's like a safe zone around the school. And then there was one other question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are also establishing this kind of zone in Austria, and we set the road traffic regulation for this concept as well. So it's really important. Yeah. The second question was, you're talking about stuff. Are there guidelines about the resource, human power, and money in cities or communities?
Good question. In the guidelines for local walking strategies, there is some guidance about resources, but I think we could be even more clear about this. But what it's pointed out that we should look at the different departments and multidisciplinary, but it should also be someone who is responsible and coordinate the others. Yes.
Definitely. Okay, so thank you very much. Due to maybe we are running out of time, I would go to the next presentation, Mr. Schwifcz, and he will talk about the the Masterplan walking on Salzburg on the municipality level. Michael?
I will present in German. It's a pleasure to present the Masterplan walking of the city of Salzburg. Well, why has the city of Salzburg decided to be the first city in Austria to start a Masterplan walking? In Salzburg, the problem is that in between 1995 and 2018, walking has decreased by 9.5%. But everybody walks for a little bit, even if it's just from the office to the car park. And because in Salzburg we have the river and the hills in the city, and that's why walking is very important, because it doesn't take up a lot of space. And because we can accommodate a lot more walkers than cars. In addition, walking is suitable for any age, from the age of 1 or 2 up until high age, whereas not everybody can drive. In addition, it's good for your health. The WHO recommends to do 1,000 steps every day, and that can also be facilitated with our master plan. This is a comparison in between Salzburg and other European cities, and unfortunately, we are in the bottom half, and also other Austrian cities and towns are much better than Salzburg. The status quo, current situation in Salzburg, both these areas are pedestrian areas. On the left-hand side, the Litscher. It looks beautiful, it's very well arranged. On the other side, Keilgasse, it's also a pedestrian area, but it just hasn't been improved and updated visually to look like a pedestrian area. What are the goals of our master plan? First of all, we want to stop this decrease in walking. Currently, we have 19%, and we want to achieve 21% in 2030. Then also we want to make the current pedestrian areas more attractive. We want to add shared spaces, additional pedestrian areas in the city, and we want to improve the quality of spending time in public spaces. And in combination with the public traffic strategy and also a cycling strategy, we want to decrease the proportion of car traffic to have more cyclists and walkers. The project was started in autumn 2019 together with our political partners. In the beginning of 2020, we chose a company. It was Commobile from a town called Gmunden. We wanted to finish by the end of last year, but because of COVID, there was a delay, and we are now about 6 months late. In autumn, we organized workshops with different stakeholders. So there was a political workshop with stakeholders and representatives of the different parties, but also tourism, public traffic, and the government were involved in order to develop a joint master plan walking. So we drew up a report with 37 measures and projects. And this report is being finalized at the moment, and we would like to publish it in June or July. And the it will be made public in autumn 2021. Now, what have we been doing? We started with workshops in working groups, then the results of these workshops were edited and presented, discussed with the politicians, and then we developed measures and projects, and in January it was presented, and at the moment the government is working on a final proposal. Here the content of the master plan, analyzing the current situation, setting up targets and strategies. What do we want to achieve by 2030? What measures and actions will be used to achieve this? And then we will have some key projects. A short preview of our measures and actions. That's the basis for us for planning traffic on an everyday basis. It's traffic lights up to shared spaces. We have 37 actions in 7 areas. And these actions should be considered in all future planning projects. And based on these 37 measures in 7 areas, we developed lead projects to make this master plan visible to the citizens. We will have many more projects, of course, but these lead projects are what we want to publish and market. 7 areas of action. It's infrastructure for walkers, walker-friendly city planning, information and awareness building, a new culture of mobility, active participation in the future of walking. So we will have reality labs and things like that. We want to strengthening public traffic, public transport, because we need public transport in order to foster walking, because many people use public transport. And then the last area is responsibility and monitoring, to also monitor our progress with our master plan and the modal split. To be honest, we haven't decided on anything yet. So this is just a quick overview, but in autumn 2021, we will hold the 15th Austrian Conference for Walkers, and during this conference, we will present the master plan. It will describe all the lead projects, and there will hopefully also be a publication about the master plan. Yes. We've planned several projects. For example, have a shared space in the city center. So near the old town, there's currently a road that's not walker friendly, and in 2024 2025 this will be changed into a shared space pedestrian area. Thank you.
Here we go.
Okay. Okay, nice. Thank you very much. So thank you for having me, dear Austrian colleagues. We have no national master plan in Switzerland. Therefore, I'm talking about our legal framework regarding walking on the national level. As we are a confederal state, I am focusing on how an implementation on the level of the cantons, these are the regions, and the communes is possible. This reveals the challenges involved. And as I'm representing the National Professional Organization of Walking, I'm mentioning two examples of our work, which is partly linked to these legal frames and to the national program. The next slide, please. Talking about master plans and legal frames means to realize how a state is working. To visualize, I use a pyramid, maybe a bit old school. The two fields on the top are empty. This is because the Federal Council as a body holds the executive power in Switzerland. Its composition, according to a certain key, the magic formula, is largely stable. Therefore, there is no explicitly formulated government program, as is common in many European countries. In the field below, I have placed strategy and plans. As mentioned, there is no official master plan walking. But there is a strategy active mobility called Leitbild-Langsamverkehr, slow motion traffic, which was developed 20 years ago in a large-scale process involving various departments and representatives of professional associations. I think similar as in Austria nowadays. Unfortunately, this strategy was never approved by the legislative power, probably for fear that no majorities could be found. It never found its way into official policy and administration. So no red carpet yet. In the next field below, I've placed legal frames and fundamental goals. There we have the federal law about footpaths and hiking trails, which is anchored in the Federal Constitution of Switzerland. I think this is still unique around the globe. Based on this, we were guaranteed status of a national professional organization and the association's right to appeal. I will go into this later. In the last field, at the bottom of this pyramid, we have other programs and projects in favor of walking. There are different modes of implementation of the federal law following the logic of subsidiarity. Also, we have a bunch of programs that promote walking organized by different offices and by cooperation. These programs are usually assigned to a specific purpose. Since walking is a transversal to these topics and can be understood as meta-mobility with a lot of other qualities, as we all know, we try to contribute as a national organization as good as possible. Next slide, please. Back to the legal frames. The legal and constitutional foundation of walking is linked to the origins of our organization. They emerged in the context of the 1970s. The claim was walking in residential areas should remain possible, and therefore the planning, the construction, and the maintenance of footpaths should be guaranteed by law. The result was an initiative that was accepted by people with 78% votes in favor. That was 1985. The implementation of this constitutional article was followed by a new federal act about footpaths and hiking trails, which finally came in force in 1987. This federal law about footpaths does work as a framework law. Let's talk, for example, about Article 4. There, the legal obligation for footpath network plans is anchored. Namely, the cantons shall ensure that A, existing and planned footpath and hiking trail networks are recorded in plans. B, the plans are periodically reviewed and adjusted if necessary. This means within the procedure of subsidiarity in Switzerland that every canton has to provide firstly its own legal frames and ordinance about footpaths. Until now, on this level, all of the cantons have somehow implemented the national law via acts or ordinance. This is good news, 35 years after enactment. The details of this implementation, the priorities, and the impact of these legal frames varies in all of the 26 cantons. Secondly, as footpaths in residential areas are mostly part of practice on a small scale, the role of the communes and the cities is crucial. We've heard about this today. Naturally, the state of implementation of the cantonal law in the communes manifests itself differently. In summary, we can actually conclude that about half of all the approximately 2,200 Swiss communes have footpath network plans on paper or digitally prepared. Next slide, please. With the national legal frame, the federal government recognized the former working group and thus our organization as a professional organization with its own right of appeal. This means that we are the advocates for safe, free, direct, and obstacle-free footpath networks within residential areas. We make selectively use of our right, mostly on communal level, when legal ordinance and rules for walking are missing, insufficiently used, or passed over. A case which happened a few years ago when the canton of Aargau removed many pedestrian crossings. The reason of the canton, in this case of Windisch, was that the pedestrian crossing would lead to congestion. A statement made with a car-centric perspective, especially as the crossing has an important role for a lot of students to reach campus, sport facilities, and train station on foot. The appeal of our organization was successful. The decision made by the Administrative Court of Aargau in the summer of 2019 was significant. It ruled that pedestrian crossings are part of a footpath network according to the federal law, once they are registered as a direct connection in the footpath network plan. Hence, it is not possible to remove them without replacement. We are rarely playing this legal card in the power play for mobility hierarchy. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the implementation of the federal law shows its quality on the level of the canton or the commune. Of course, there again, a strategy and a plan does not simply implement itself as a matter of course. I like to highlight at this point 3 good practices which go beyond the structural basics of planning for walking. Firstly, despite the lack of adoption of the in the beginning mentioned national strategy active mobility, one principle of it flowed 2012 into the national strategy sustainable development and is known as the 3-pillar principle. This principle is now also anchored in a few cantons and means that walking and cycling, motorized individual transport and public transport has to be promoted and enabled to the same extent. Nothing about prioritization, but here shows a will. Secondly, a good example, quite a few cantons and most of the bigger cities in Switzerland have kind of strategy for walking, at least on paper and in political speech. This is an important step also. And an important thing which goes often hand in hand with these local strategies is a separation of the goals for walking and cycling. The operational logic and the concrete claims of walking and cycling are completely different. I think most of you know about that. Thirdly, the last example of good practice I'm mentioning is the measurements of model split shifts. This is used by the Canton of Geneva. There, the ideal numbers of the model split shift were declared. The goal was linked to concrete projects. Also, as a consequence of that, the walking part regarding stages of the model split in Geneva has increased within the last years and is now with nearly 60% one of the highest scores in Switzerland. Next slide, please. Our organization is playing a double role in this whole dynamic. On the one hand, we support as a national professional organization within the actual political logic, the Federal Office of Road, by providing materials and basics, like, for example, design guides for planning and engineering. On the other hand, we have the association's right to appeal to correct government actions. And we are also an association with a purpose and a vision which goes way beyond the realpolitik. Last page, please, last slide. That's it, some brief insights from Switzerland. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much for this insight and your presentation. We're running out of time. Maybe one really short question about the common different goals for cycling and walking. For sure, it's really important, but are there also maybe the same goals, like, for example, shared space zones to make the urban areas more attractive for both transport modes?
sorry, I missed the beginning because I was reading the chat.
There are also some common goals for cycling and walking.
Yeah, there are. There is of course with this 3-pillar principle. We have on one hand the common goal. Okay, active mobility should be at least equal. This is the goal. And then there are certain cities or certain cantons. They are playing with numbers, and they are really declaring specific numbers for their own model split shift. That is quite a few of the cantons are mentioning it like that, or handling like that. I just saw a question about Geneva because I mentioned this example for Geneva. Geneva is perhaps a bit an exception, but also a really good example because the canton is very small and it mainly contains only one big city, Geneva, which means that the density of the city and the canton is really high, and that is why it is really, or it's easier to achieve a higher stage of walking in the model split. It's a possibility, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm happy to introduce our last speaker today, Harald Frey. He will talk about resilient structures for walking, from road cross-section to network. Welcome.
Hello, welcome. Good afternoon from my side. I will try to share my slides. At the end, I would like to open up the discussion a little bit and coming from the very often pointed view of the qualities of for walking on the road cross section, widen it a little bit up and take a look at the road network. So we often discuss qualities and the boundary conditions for walking at the cross section, and maybe it's good. Next slide, please. To talk about the qualities and the conditions that we need for walking when we zoom out a little bit and take a look at the network. At the network for walking at the neighborhood, the network for walking at the city as a whole. So therefore we have to talk, of course, about the network qualities. One is the principle of redundancy. Because of the shortness of time, I can't go in detail on each of these aspects. But just to give you some ideas, then another one is the question of diversity, of interconnectedness and subsidiarity. And of course, the question how we measure the adequacy of urban structures, which are often measured, of course, with the good known indicators, behavioral indicators like model split or frequency. But the question is also what we do not take into account when we use these indicators, especially if we focus on the network. So what I plead for is a little bit coming or widen up the view coming from the road cross section and making it up to a view on the network. And if we widen up this view, of course, then we see, and I will show you on the next slides, that there is a connection between, of course, the laws of human behavior and the laws of urban structure. This is the examples we often discuss. We discuss the qualities on the cross-section, like small scale, like high density, like not linear streets, but meandering streets, all this stuff. Next slide. But of course, if we take a look at the network, then we have to take into account human behavior, and that means on the one hand, and this is also maybe known for most of you, the connection, the interdependence between the acceptance of walking distance and the walking distances itself. And we all know that the longer the distance the acceptance gets following this function is declining. Depending on the surrounding, on the quality and the walking quality of the surrounding. Next slide. But of course, and if we now zoom out a little bit and question how the network should be designed, then one indicator, for instance, is the number of squares. How many squares are situated? How do they look like inside the network? Squares are somehow like an information hotspot for walking people. There are businesses, there are shops, there are the possibility for sojourning. It's maybe the end of a strolling zone or whatever. So that means that we have to have a detailed look on how squares are designed in the city network, in the city walking network especially. And you see that there is a maximum length of distances between these squares that is, I would say, that focuses on the responsibility on walkability. That is, if we go back one slide, then you see that there was the declining of the curve beginning with the 200 to 300 meter, and now coming back to the network of squares, then you see that the average distance, just on one example, is between 200 and 300 meters in all these networks and all these structures that are very good concerning walkability. Next. Of course, if we take a deeper look at these historical city structures and compare them with the qualities for walking, then we all know that we enjoy these structures because they are very small scale. They have this human scale adaptability. They have this redundancy in network. They have this possibility that you can orient yourself, that you do not have to have a map or an app or whatever leading you through the network intrinsically. Next. So, and if you take a look at this comparison between, I would say, human behavior laws and structural laws, which have, of course, independency, then you see that if we focus on these walkability structures, we have a very, very high part of narrow streets. We have an average part of mid-sized streets and a very, very low part of boulevards and big-sized streets. And if we compare this, just one step below, push the left button, we stay on the slide, yes. Then if you compare it with our human behavior, these old scale structures completely fit very well to how we behave, because we have an enormous amount of trips that are short trips. And you see it on the right-hand side, we have a very short number, or very few number of trips that are long-distance trips. This is an old travel behavior, Lille's travel law from the end of the 19th century, where he showed that the number of journeys and the length of journeys is a constant. So you see that there is a comparison and they fit very well. If we design a network that is comparable to walkability or that is oriented to walkability, then of course it is designed, or it fits quite well to that what we want also, that we have a huge amount of short trips. Of course, if you look at, let's say, structures in the USA or in car-oriented structures, then the upper diagram is very, very flat. Then you see that there is not a huge differentiation between narrow streets and boulevards. There is no hierarchy at all. So they are very, very similar. And of course, that is not, or this is a bad indicator, I would say, for walking infrastructure, for walkability. Next. Yeah, and this is nothing new at all. I mean, there is this the aspects of hierarchy in the system, and of course, the system conditions like emergence and resilience are part of the discussion of morphology of urban network. And going back to Christopher Alexander with his saying, a city is not a tree, maybe that's a good it's a good indicator also, that we see how the network is structured in a city and how does it really work, or for whom does it work the better than for whom does it work better. And you see the difference, what he did mean with that. The city is not a tree. So if we take a leaf and look at the backside of the leaf, then you see this small scale, natural organized structure. Every node is connected is multiplied very often and connected very often with each other. And this is completely different, of course, to the structure of a tree. Next. Yeah, and of course, walking is a matter of structures, especially of city structures and especially concerning morphology. So you see, we have a small scale structures. If we have small plot sizes, not bigger than 300 square meters, for instance, then of course we have the possibility to produce redundancy, to have a very, very flexible network. And we all have all these aspects. We often talk about human scale, 15-minute cities. What do I have in my neighborhood? What can I reach in a certain amount of walking distance? So these are various aspects that may often in the discussion about structures for walking are not taken into account or maybe too less taken into account, to my opinion, because so we produce in a very extreme way the structures more and more that are shown on the right-hand side. And of course, they are missing hierarchy, they are missing the diversity of public spaces, they are missing the adaptability, and of course, this dimension of the plot size, they just very good fits to car-oriented structures, or it is a car-oriented structure, but it has nothing to do with walkability. Next. Yeah, summarizing all these things, it's a very, very short presentation, but of course, there's lying a lot of theoretical background behind, coming from this road cross-section discussion, which is as important as the discussion how the network is designed, especially on city development areas and so on. So the suitability of certain urban structures is currently often done descriptively using behavior-based indicators like model spread, like frequency, and so on. But what also should take more into account, I would say more, is the influence, the size, the dimension of the plot size, of course, how they are designed and how the buildings are oriented and so on. On these plots, the street network laws in harmonization should be harmonized with the scale size of the elements. So what do the people need and how do the buildings look like where the people want to go, or the surrounding the public space. And the last three dots, I used them from Serge Salar from the Urban Morphology Institute. So he also said dense and interconnected network of streets of different functions is very, very important. Streets that are places for people and promote walking, of course, and these small street blocks with diversified physical characteristics. I think that's I'm coming to the end. Just switch to the next slide. I'm not quite sure. Yes, that was it. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. Harald, I like this last slide with the picture, and I want to ask you one short question. I think this is the Corona crisis, the pandemic. You see in the graphic, do you think that there is a chance to urban planning and to a model shift to active mobility, more walking, more cycling due to the pandemic?
I don't think so. I don't see that the pandemic will change. Will be a big change for mobility. It will, I think, it will strengthen on the one hand, and it will, of course, be like a loop that will show us what went wrong the last decades, and will also show us what we have to do. But of course, we talked about that 3 or 4 decades ago also, which has to be done in order to reach climate goals and so on.
Okay, Harald left us, unfortunately. Jim Walker also wrote in the chat to Harald Frey, the increase in demand for safe spaces to walk in COVID times is accelerating in the network changes you mentioned in a lot of places. Monika Litscher is also writing very realistic, but there is a momentum. So maybe Harald will join us in the next seconds, but due to the fact that we're running out of time, actually we have already finished the session. I want you to thank you for joining us today, for being here, for your interest, for your time. And I think that there's a lot going on also in the chat, and I appreciate all the interest you have in this topic. And I hope that we will use also this network hub-in platform for networking, and maybe we'll see each other in the next days, in the next webinars. Thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.